Welcome to Comfort Crime with Lindsay Sanchez, a cozy mystery podcast where no actual crimes have been committed. Today, we'll continue Murder on Maple Mountain, a cozy mystery with an amateur sleuth, a second chance romance, small town secrets, and enough twists to keep you guessing until the final page. If this is your first time here, welcome, and please start with episode 1, chapter 1, or feel free to start with the prequel short story, Death at Dogwood Lake. That's season 2. There is a link to both in the show notes. For everyone else, we'll continue to chapter 3, but first, an update. Okay, I hope you're cozied up somewhere warm because I have a confession to make. A few of you have been asking and might remember that I said I was going to try to get ahead on Murder on Maple Mountain. Yeah, that didn't happen. I am flying by the seat of my pants, but honestly, I'm loving it. Just like I did Death at Dogwood Lake, so far, every week when I sit down to write the next chapter, I'm right there with you, discovering clues, second-guessing suspects, and wondering what our amateur sleuth is going to stumble on next. Okay, I do know who the killer is, and I know exactly why they're making such terrible choices. I've got a roadmap of where we're headed, but the magic is the little details that keep surprising me too. Or, as in this week's episode, the big details. I had a certain character planned. I had him playing a small role in this chapter, but his small role turned into a very big one, and I'm really excited about it, and I hope you love it. So buckle up, friend. We are on this twisty, turny murder mystery ride together, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Last time, when Ivy Whitehead, the most despised woman in their Rocky Mountain town, dropped dead seemingly out of nowhere, the authorities were quick to rule it natural causes. But Georgia's true crime podcast obsession and razor-sharp instincts tell her something's wrong. Ivy was healthy, hateful, and very much alive moments before she wasn't. So when her friend Lisa's cupcake reminds her of the strange scent that was around Ivy's body, Georgia rushes out of the bakery in a way that has nothing to do with the growing snowstorm or her decade-long crush, Jake, showing up with his girlfriend. Murder on Maple Mountain, Chapter 3. Snow was already sticking to the roads as Georgia and her truck crawled up Maple Mountain. She'd driven straight from the bakery, not daring to take the time to go back to her place and pack a bag. She had her truck and her chains. Everything else she'd have to borrow from Sienna or dig through their old stuff in the attic. The higher Georgia and her truck climbed, the angrier the blizzard got, erasing the color around her, leaving only a few feet of visibility in front of her truck that her lights could penetrate, and rough shapes and shadows in the distance. Georgia shivered and turned up the heater, wishing she'd had time to grab her coat. She hated driving in the snow. She should have rushed to Sienna's at the first sign of the storm. She should have turned and walked out of Lisa's bakery when those first fat raindrops had hit the windows. Better yet, she should have never gone to the Stairway to Heaven bakery to begin with. A vision of Jake with his girlfriend's arms wrapped around him popped into Georgia's head unbidden. She shook it away and pounded the steering wheel. Of course Jake had a girlfriend. It's not like she'd expected him to sit around for years waiting for her to have the guts to call him. Though, He could have called her too. It wasn't her mom who had freaked out every time they were on the phone, or her dad to move their family to Mountain View. It was only a few hours' drive, but for a 16-year-old, that might have been another country. Georgia wasn't 16 anymore. She hadn't been for a long time. Now she couldn't pretend that she and Jake had been anything more or less than a summer fling. Or maybe they had been less. One date, one kiss. And it had all happened so long ago. He didn't owe her anything. And it was high time she got that through her thick head. "Come on, Georgia, get it together," she muttered. Maybe seeing Jake with his girlfriend was exactly what she needed to move on. He clearly had. Plus, if she hadn't gone, she wouldn't have made the connection about that smell near Ivy and how it may or may not have been pumpkin. That could mean something. She didn't know what exactly, but she had a guess, a hunch. She just needed to get to her old books in Sienna's attic to make sure. Georgia squinted through the growing fog on her windshield and turned up the defroster. Just ahead, 2 cars were pulled over to the side of the road next to a large "Chains Required" sign. Chains were going to be a nightmare to get on by herself, and without a coat. If she had a real truck, she wouldn't have to worry about chains. Georgia pulled over to the side of the road behind the other 2 cars and parked her truck. She rolled down the sleeves of her button-up, cursing Sienna for choosing today to leave, and Ivy for choosing today to die, though she possibly couldn't have helped that. And Jake. Mostly Jake. Bracing herself against the inevitable onslaught of cold and snow, she took a deep breath and opened the door. Wind instantly infiltrated the warmth in the cab of her little truck. It latched onto Georgia's skin, chilling her to goosebumps the moment she stepped onto the snow-covered road. Georgia tied her hair into a ponytail, ignoring the cold pricks of snowflakes on the back of her neck, and went to the bed of the truck. Black buckets of wilted flowers. Nothing else. No silver glint, no squat rectangular shape. Her toolbox wasn't there. It was always there. Georgia cursed under her breath again. She'd taken it out for Violet's wedding and must have forgotten to put it back in. She couldn't get up the mountain without chains, and the way it was snowing, chances weren't much better she could get down the mountain either. Short of staying there until the snowplows came, or calling Frank to come get her, Georgia didn't have much of a plan. But she couldn't call Frank. Not today. Not after Ivy. Georgia shivered. "Need help?" A voice yelled from the Jeep at the front of the line of cars. A big coat and hat walked towards her. "Got any extra chains?" Georgia called back, because other than that, or magically making her truck 4-wheel drive, there wasn't much a random guy on Maple Mountain could do. "Whoa," the guy said when he got close enough to Georgia to see her shivering next to her truck. "You were not prepared for a storm." "Oh, I always climb mountains like this." "Yeah," he said, a little bit of laughter in his voice. "I don't have extra chains. I'm just here to help people put them on." He rubbed the back of his neck like he didn't know what to do from here. "It's okay." Georgia saved him from his misery. "I'll have someone come pick me up." "Where are you headed?" The man looked at her, then the truck, and back again, clearly not ready to give up being helpful that easily. Sunset Cabin Glen. It's not far. I'll be fine." The man lifted his beanie a little and squinted closer at Georgia, like he was trying to see around her snow-covered hair and frozen red cheeks. Like he was confused he hadn't seen her before. Like he might know everybody on Maple Mountain. "Thanks anyway," Georgia said, and gave him a tight-lipped smile. She opened her door with her numb fingers. "Hang on," the man said, before she could hop in her car completely and shut the door. "Sienna. Do you know Sienna?" Georgia stalled, one foot in her cab, one still in the gathering snow. "I'm Sean," he said, like that should clear everything up. Like she should have a clue who Sean was. "Sean Stewart?" he said, clearly interpreting her confusion. "I'm Ivy Whitehead's nephew, Sienna's neighbor. I stay with my aunt in the winter, help her out." "I did." "I'm so sorry about your aunt," Georgia said through chattering teeth. It was nice to meet you." Now that she thought about it, Sienna had said something about a hot grandson or someone that came up in the winter. She'd even tried to set Georgia up a few times with him. Not that she'd ever gone. "I was on my way to town when my sister called. She says they're coming up." Sean shook his head like he still couldn't believe it. "She's been in a lot of pain for a while. We'll miss her, but between you and me, she was ready to go." That was a side of Ivy Whitehead Georgia had never seen. "Still, I'm sorry," Georgia said. And thanks for trying to help." She got in her truck, closed the door, and rubbed her arms for warmth, making a mental list of her friends who had four-wheel drive and wouldn't mind an hour-long detour derailing their day. Rachel worked from home and had a Suburban. She might be able to take a long, late lunch break. Georgia called her. "I'm sorry," Rachel said, on the other end of the line, after Georgia had explained the situation. "I have to pick up Emmy from preschool in 20 minutes. Call me back in an hour if you haven't found somebody else." Georgia hung up. With school pickup on the horizon, that was all of her mom friends out. Unless Georgia wanted to huddle in the growing cold for an hour and a half. And most of the emergency responders would still be helping with Ivy and paperwork. She couldn't call Frank, but maybe Lisa could borrow Frank's truck. It was pathetic. She didn't even have to say it out loud to know she'd reached a new level of desperation. Resting her head against the steering wheel, Georgia tried not to think about the only other person she knew with a truck, who wasn't a mom, a medical professional, or grieving Ivy Whitehead. But she really, really didn't want to call Jake. A knock on Georgia's window made her jump. Sean waved to the other car as it pulled away, chains on, tires intact. He turned to smile at Georgia. "I'll give you a ride," he yelled through the window. "What?" Georgia rolled it down a crack, unwilling to let too much cold in. "I can give you a ride." "You don't have to do that," Georgia hesitated. It wasn't like she had a lot of options, but she knew better than to get in a car with a stranger, even if he said he knew her sister. "It's fine. I have a friend coming," she lied, to make it less awkward for both of them. "Well, tell them not to bother, because your dashing Prince Charming is here to rescue you." Sean opened the door and bowed with his hand out, like he was some old-timey prince helping her out of a carriage. Georgia laughed, despite her ridiculous, self-inflicted calamity and the renewed rush of cold. "I'll be fine waiting here," she said, not quite ready to accept his hand or his offer of a ride up the mountain. Even if he wasn't lying about knowing her sister or being Ivy's nephew, Georgia didn't know him, and getting in a car with a random guy in the middle of a snowstorm on an isolated mountain was just not advisable. You might have more customers. Georgia tried to reason him out of his offer. Not many people are crazy enough to drive up a mountain in a storm like this. He winked at her. It's okay. Georgia smiled through her chattering teeth, wrapping her arms more fully around herself to try to stop her uncontrollable shivers. My friend's on her way. Thank you, though. I get it. Sean straightened, dropping his Prince act and looking at her seriously. You don't know me. Of course you shouldn't feel comfortable getting a ride from me. He unzipped his coat, pulled it off, and shook out the snow, tucking it around Georgia before she could protest. I also don't feel comfortable leaving Sienna's sister stranded in a snowstorm, so I'll be sitting in my Jeep to make sure your friend gets here okay. And if you change your mind or she can't make it, you let me know. Sean bowed again, his quirky smile back in place. He headed back to his Jeep, the snow almost completely swallowing him and his white t-shirt before he got there. With the temperature steadily dropping, even with Sean's coat, Georgia would freeze before Rachel could get up here. And even if the snowplows did come quickly, she was sitting on the side of the road. They would just bury her. Georgia put her arms through the sleeves and zipped Sean's coat closed, pulling the hood over her snow-damp hair. She let Sean's residual body heat warm her. She could turn the truck back on, burn through her gas, and hope it lasted long enough for Rachel to get there before her fingers went permanently numb. Or she could trust the man in the Jeep and probably make it safely to her sister's house. The most logical thing would be to text her sister, if she weren't on a 16-hour flight over the Atlantic. Georgia would just have to trust her gut. If Sean had tried to convince her or promise her that she'd be safe, that would have been a red flag, but his quiet concern and understanding actually did make Georgia feel safe. And the fact that he was sitting in his Jeep waiting for her to choose, letting it be completely up to her, well, her mom always said actions speak louder than words. Georgia grabbed her bag, jumped out of her truck, and ran to the Jeep. With the snow still piling up, soon they'd both be stuck on the side of the road. I guess I will take that ride. Thanks. Georgia hopped into the passenger seat, looked up, and caught her breath. With all the snow earlier, she hadn't gotten a good look at him. Sean was gorgeous. Well, more ruggedly good-looking than gorgeous. Put a cowboy hat on his dirty blonde hair, and those bright blue eyes would be right at home in a cheesy Christmas movie. Georgia silently apologized to Sienna for the few times she'd stood Sean and her sister's matchmaking efforts up. Decided I'm trustworthy enough for a ride? Sean guessed, waiting for Georgia to buckle before putting the Jeep into four-wheel drive and crunching over the snow-covered road. The jury's still out, but I'm not above jumping and taking my chances with the snow if they rule against you. Then I'll try to keep my more annoying personality traits in the cupboard for the next 10 minutes. Cute and funny. Georgia could work with this. If only her decade-long crush on Jake could be so easily persuaded. Sean's Jeep made quick work of the steep mountain road. Before Georgia knew it, they were pulling up to Sienna's front door. My lady? Sean Fake half bowed in his seat, waving his hand around his head like he was taking off a fancy hat. "Thank you, my good sir." She played along. "If you need anything, I'll be at Ivy's." My hero. Georgia pulled her bag from between her feet and opened the door. "Thanks, though. For real, seriously, you did completely save me today." She hopped into the shin-deep snow and trudged to the side door, the one Sienna always left open for her. Inside, Georgia set down her bag and took off her coat. Sean's coat. She'd forgotten to give it back. She'd have to walk to Ivy's and give it to him when she went to check on Rose. But first, she had a date with the attic and a dusty stack of books. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a mystery-loving friend or consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast player. Most of all, thank you so much for being here today. I loved it, and I'm already excited for next week.